everyone. Welcome to Epworth Clinic's live Facebook cast. This is the first time we're doing one of these, so we're really excited to have you all on board. Today is World Mental Health Day, and because of that we thought it might be a really interesting time for us to come out live on the web and answer some of those really difficult questions that people kind of don't like answering or are too scared to ask. So my name's Maya. I work at Epworth Clinic, our mental health service at Epworth, and this is Hannah, one of our clinical psychologists. So we're going to go through a couple questions, so we hope you're interested, and feel free to type to us and let us know if you've got any other questions, and make sure at the end of the video that you like and share it with people. So Hannah, we're going to start off hopefully with an easy one that we get asked about all the time, which is, why does it seem today that lots of people have mental illness, or that it's around a lot more than it ever was?
Yeah, well, I think the quick answer to that is lots of people do have mental illness. It's a very common thing. I think I've got some stats here, so I'm just going to gaze down at those. Around 4 million Australians have a mental health problem at any one time. And 1 in every 5 Australians suffer from a mental disorder in any given year, so you can see it is really a very common thing. And one thing we do know for sure is that rates of mental illness are really increasing, unfortunately, in young people, particularly in those aged 15 to 19, and particularly in females. We don't know exactly why that is. And then the other side of the answer to that question is that luckily we have an increased awareness now about mental illness. So hopefully we see more people seeking help, and I think a lot of that has been helped by an increased awareness in the media, and we see lots of celebrities thankfully coming out now and being honest about their struggles with mental health problems, which is great. And we just hope that that kind of opens up the conversation and increases that awareness.
Thanks for that. That's really interesting. So I guess one of the things often that people get confused about is about when they're trying to seek help, who's the right person to kind of seek help to.
Yeah.
And so I know often people will ask us here, so should I see a psychologist or should I see a psychiatrist? What's the difference between those two? So can you maybe explain to people what the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist is?
Absolutely, yeah. And there is lots of confusion about that. I mean, both the names sound very similar.
Yeah.
And sometimes people need to see both a psychologist and a psychiatrist, I guess, in their recovery journey. But in a nutshell, a psychiatrist is a doctor who has had medical training and has then decided to go on and specialise in psychiatry, so had additional training in psychiatry. And they can then also prescribe medications as well, which is something that a psychologist absolutely can't do. Yeah. So us psychologists have at least a 4-year degree in psychology, and then we will go on to do at least 2 years further study and or training on top of that. And psychologists tend to specialise in assessments and or therapy.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm wondering, I guess at Epworth Clinic we have a mixture of psychologists, social workers, occupational therapists, amongst a lot of other allied health. So do you guys all work in the same way, or is it different?
We work in a really similar way here. We're all therapists. We all do a very similar job when we present in groups or when we see individuals for therapy. Yeah. However, I guess the big difference is that we have slightly different ways of conceptualising mental health and mental illness, but nothing significant.
Yeah. All right, that's really interesting. And I know that something people sometimes worry about is kind of, if I get depressed or if I have a mental illness, is it going to be something that happens to me as a one-off, or is this something that's going to be lifelong? Yeah. Can I have treatment? Is the treatment successful? So what are your thoughts around that kind of question?
I guess particularly for the more common mental health disorders like depression and anxiety, treatments now are fantastic, and I think success rates in treating people and helping them to feel a lot better are very high. Sometimes mental illness can recur. Sometimes somebody can recover, a mental illness can recur across a lifetime. Doesn't mean that somebody's unwell for the rest of their life. And other times some people can have one incident in their lifetime of mental illness and not have a further incident. So
and
there is.
You mentioned depression, and I know we were talking about earlier that depression and anxiety are probably the most prevalent disorders out there that people would experience. So at a kind of really general level, what are some of the things that you might do as a psychologist with someone with depression? Are you doing kind of one-on-one therapy? Are you doing groups, or what is it that you do with them?
Well, here at Epworth we might do a bit of both. So in individual therapy we might try and help somebody to find some of that enjoyment in their life again, because that's one of the key things that happens when somebody's depressed, is they have a low mood and they lose interest in the things that they previously enjoyed. So one of the things that we might do is help them to become active again and find that enjoyment as well. We assess what has gone wrong for them so that they can stop repeating some of those patterns, and we just give them some tools that they can use so that they can feel empowered to kind of change some of their thinking around their depression.
All right, thank you. So I guess that leads on to this question, is kind of, where does mental illness come from? Is this something that we inherit as people? Is it something that we get environmentally? So what do you think?
It's a great question, and I guess there isn't a simple answer to that. The answer is really that we don't know exactly. But we think our best guess is that it's a mixture of environment and genetics, because mental illnesses can run in families. That's not to say that everybody who has a parent with a mental illness will become ill themselves. And also people with mental illness might have no family history at all of mental illness. So yeah, I guess it's a combination of those kind of genetics and perhaps some environmental factors as well.
All right. I guess one of the things that I've always been interested in is the kind of the chicken and the egg around this, and you know, you said it around, doesn't mean because you've got a family member that it has to happen. So what I might do is do a quick drawing, which I think is something that I always use as a way to try and understand, and we call it the stress bucket. And this is a way to understand how sometimes stress and all those things going on in our lives might influence that type of stuff. So what I'm going to do is draw what we call the stress bucket, and I guess everyone has a stress bucket in their life. Clearly I'm not an artist. And we come, I guess, with this bucket already a bit filled, and that's what you were talking about. So it might be that I've got kind of some genetics from my family and their experience of kind of mental illness. It might be that I've had a really hard kind of like childhood, so I might have some trauma or other stuff. And then maybe I kind of had some kind of difficulty at school. And so maybe I wasn't a great student and I didn't kind of go that much, and, you know, things like that. And then there are other things that start to happen to me. So it might be, I don't know, that I had a really good relationship and the relationship broke down. And that was a really hard time for us. It might be then, I had that job, really loved it, but then actually the job was really tough and I felt pretty stressed in the job because it just got really overwhelming. And then it might be that other really simple thing that happens, and it's like, you know, you kind of have a car accident or you're in some type of thing that's out of your control. So let's use car accident as an example, right? And you can kind of see it actually doesn't take that much for people's buckets to be full, So one of the things I think about is, okay, well, what happens as your bucket's filling up? Some of it we can't change because we kind of inherited it. And then there are these other things that occur. And so what happens is, as soon as the bucket fills up, it starts to kind of overflow on the side, And when it's overflowing, that's when kind of acute mental illness happens. So that's when maybe I'm feeling more depressed. And as you said, I don't enjoy things as much. So one of the things that's really important is, well, how do we try and manage that so actually our buckets don't get too full? Because it's much harder to kind of, you know, stop things once they're overflowing than to kind of keep them at bay. So what I like to talk to people about is this idea of what are the protective factors? What are the good things in your life that we can build in that make sure your routine is kind of helping you? So what we do is we like to drill holes in the bucket so that the bucket is constantly draining and as it's filling up. So that might be, you know what, I have a really great relationship with my family and I find them really supportive. I really like doing yoga. It gives me half an hour a week to really think about things. And then it might be something like, oh, I really love going to see live music. So I'm going to make sure that I go and see live music at least once a week or at least once a fortnight. Then it might be, you know what, I really like when actually it's not about me and I get to go and do some volunteer work. So I go and kind of do some volunteer, or spelled very badly, work. And actually what we then see is that some of these things start to go away. Because I might have stress in my job, but actually because I'm doing all these protective things, actually I'm able to manage and to not be as stressed out about it. So I think one of the reasons to draw this is for people to kind of think about what is it about you and what's going on for you in your life and your stresses that maybe models that. So that's a way to kind of remember it's not always about what you can control and what are the really important things to do in your life to give you a bit of break and space.
Yeah, it's a really lovely analogy, that one.
So let's move on to a topic that we know gets asked all the time. Definitely got spoken about at a Q&A recently, which is, can someone with a mental illness actually maintain a job and be in the workforce?
Absolutely they can, for sure. And I guess it partly depends on how well they're functioning, but it also depends on how supportive the workplace is as well.
Yeah.
However, if somebody is really feeling unwell, it's perfectly fine that, you know, to take some time out and to focus on recovery and self-care as well.
Yeah. And do you have any kind of, I guess, and this is maybe putting you on the spot a bit, but are there any tips or things that you could think about around how you might suggest someone to try and kind of have that conversation in the workplace? I know Beyond Blue has some really good resources on their website around how workplaces can support people, but have you, in any of your clinical work, had experiences with people where you're kind of coaching them into how to have those chats or how to be honest or what that might feel like?
Yeah, I've helped a couple of people to really sort of write some things down so that they don't feel overwhelmed when they go into the workplace, so they're kind of prepared, almost have a script and get across what they want to say, and also to kind of provide some reassurance that they're still themselves, that they're just having some symptoms at the moment that need some extra time and attention.
And I think one of the things, you know, I really like what you said there, because, you know, often people get much more worried about kind of having to talk to a boss or someone in the workplace and their friends and family around mental illness. But I guess what we also know is that we're not really worried when we have the flu and we can't go into work and we need a bit of time out. So I think it's always important to try and think about, well, if this was me with a broken ankle or a flu, would I actually be worried about having to be explicit about needing a bit of time to look after myself?
For sure, yeah.
So that kind of leads on, I guess, to this question around, do you think people with mental illnesses get discriminated against?
Unfortunately, I think they do. I think things are getting much better, but I think that people with mental illnesses still experience some discrimination. And I guess that can even be from friends and family when they disclose that they have a diagnosis. Some people can find that friends and family withdraw a bit from them, and other people may get the sense that, you know, they have missed out on job opportunities, for instance, because of mental illness. So unfortunately, I think that does still occur.
And I guess you said earlier that, you know, there's a lot of good activities going on in the community with health promotion and, you know, people coming out around that, and that's probably a reason why it's important for people to start to feel more comfortable to talk about it, so people start to feel like less isolated. So I think we're getting to the end of our time, so I'm going to put you on the spot again and ask, do you have any top tips for people about how to kind of work towards good mental health? So what are the good things that we can do every day or every week to try and encourage ourselves to stay well, and how do we seek out help when we need to?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think thankfully you've given us some really good pointers for kind of stabbing the holes into the bucket to let some of the stress out. And that's things like keeping active, finding some exercise that you enjoy. Mindfulness is a great way of keeping calm and healthy as well. Seeking support and asking for help, and it might just be by, you know, starting with asking for help from friends and family, going to see a GP in the first instance as well if you are concerned that you've got some symptoms of mental illness.
All right. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on the journey with us. Everyone, we hope this has been very good for you. I think we might have a question even from the internets out there in the real world, so I'm going to take it and have a bit of a look. So the question is, what tips do you have for caring for someone with multiple mental conditions, and how do you go about recognising if, you know, people might have some difficulties going on? So I guess one of the things, do you want to answer it? Do you want me to answer it? Should I ask it?
Maybe we can answer together.
Clever. All right. So I might start with, I think that, you know, often what we know is that a lot of times when people have significant mental illness, they kind of have what we call kind of, you know, one or two of them. And so I guess sometimes what we're trying to do is to recognise what one affects the other one, and that might be where we try and target some of the work. So, you know, a really good example might be someone who's got, you know, depression and who really doesn't feel very active and able to get out of bed, and who isn't getting any enjoyment out of life, or different parts of their life domains. You know, that might mean going to family events or going to friends events becomes much more stressful, and so then actually what starts to happen is they start to get anxiety around, well, what it's going to be like, or what we do is a lot of negative self-talk. So it might be, I'm going to go there, I'm not going to have anything interesting to talk about, and so they kind of perpetuate each other. It's this kind of, you know, cycle. And so I think in terms of how do you look after someone, I always talk to people about actually just being present and, you know, taking a non-judgmental stance and really letting people know that actually I'm here to help you, and help needs to be something that you're comfortable with, something that we can do together, and being really open around that. Sometimes if I don't know how to help you, we might need to go and speak to someone else, and GPs are really good for that. GPs are what we like to call the gatekeepers to all of the health systems, so we would always encourage people, if you feel like you're not quite sure, go and have a chat with a GP. There's some really great resources online around, Carers Victoria, around Mental Health Foundation. So if you put into Google and have a bit of a look around and a play around, I think you'll always be able to find a few tips from other carers and people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to do our first ever Facebook Live. We'll be coming back to you guys soon with another one, a follow-up one, and you'll check us out on the website. We'll let you know. So as I said, happy World Mental Health Day. We hope that you all take really great steps in terms of supporting each other and yourselves. And please feel free to share this on the internet with whoever you like, and get in contact with us if there's anything we can do, and make sure you like our page so you can come back and hear our content again. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks everyone.